Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Alex moved to his peaceful forest retreat, he never imagined his quiet life would be shattered by a neighbor's greed. But when Karen claimed ownership of the only road to his home, escalating into destruction and lawsuits, Alex was forced to fight back. What followed was a battle for justice like no other. Alex had always cherished his life away from the chaos of urban living. A retired engineer in his late 60s, he had worked tirelessly to create a haven of peace and solitude. Nestled deep in the heart of a forested valley, his home was more than just a house. It was a sanctuary, built on a secluded parcel of land he had acquired decades ago. It sat at the end of a winding dirt road that cut through the woods like a hidden artery. This road, unassuming but vital, was the sole connection between Alex's world and the outside one. For years, it had served as a steadfast link for trips to town, visits from friends, and emergency runs to the nearby clinic. The property itself was a picture of tranquility. Surrounded by towering pines and vibrant maples, the air seemed perpetually filled with the earthy scent of moss and the distant murmur of a nearby brook. On quiet evenings, Alex would sit on his porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip behind the trees, content in the knowledge that here, no one could dictate his life. This independence was his pride, the fruit of years spent toiling under fluorescent lights and navigating corporate politics. His nearest neighbors were scattered across the hills, their homes separated by stretches of untamed wilderness. While Alex had encountered a few of them over the years, his interactions were friendly but sparse. He liked it that way. He had no interest in gossip or suburban squabbles. But the peace that defined his retirement was shattered when a new resident moved into the area. Karen. From the moment she arrived, Karen made her presence known. She was a woman with a commanding presence, her sharp voice echoing even through the woods. Rumors of her domineering nature trickled through the sparse community. Alex had dismissed the stories at first, assuming they were exaggerated tales from neighbors with too much time on their hands. But Karen soon proved the rumors to be painfully accurate. It began innocuously enough. One morning, Alex noticed a sleek black SUV parked near the edge of the road leading to his home. At first, he thought nothing of it. Perhaps someone had gotten lost or needed to take a break. But when he saw the vehicle parked there again the next day, and the day after that, suspicion began to creep in. One crisp autumn morning, as Alex was returning from town with a truckload of supplies, he found Karen waiting for him. She stood beside her SUV, arms crossed, her lips pursed into a thin line. Alex pulled over, stepping out of his truck with a polite but cautious smile. "Good morning," he said, keeping his tone light. Karen didn't return the pleasantry. Instead, she pointed sharply at the road. "We need to talk about this." Alex blinked, confused. "About what?" "This road," she said, her voice curt and laced with authority. "It runs through my property." For a moment, Alex was too stunned to respond. He had owned this road, this land, for years. The thought that anyone could question that seemed absurd. "I'm sorry, but this road is part of my property," he replied firmly. "It's been in use for decades, long before I even bought the land." Karen scoffed, her expression hardening. "Well, I don't know what arrangements were made before, but I've looked at the maps. This road crosses into my land, and if you want to keep using it, we'll need to come to an agreement." "An agreement?" Alex repeated, incredulous. "Yes," Karen said, her tone sharpening. "If you expect to use my land, you'll need to compensate me. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to block it off." The audacity of her claim left Alex speechless. He knew every inch of his property like the back of his hand, and he had the paperwork to prove it. Still, Karen's unyielding confidence made it clear this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was the opening salvo of a battle Alex hadn't asked for, but one he knew he couldn't avoid. Alex, ever the pragmatic and diplomatic man, decided that reasoning with Karen might still work. The following morning, armed with copies of deeds, surveys, and maps clearly showing his legal right to the road, he made his way to her property. Karen greeted him at her gate with an icy stare, her arms folded like a fortress around her chest. "Karen," Alex began evenly, holding out the documents. "I want to clarify any confusion about the road. Here are the records that prove it's part of my property. You're welcome to review them." Karen didn't even glance at the papers. Instead, she smirked and waved him off with a theatrical flick of her hand. "Oh, please. Those could be outdated or even faked for all I know. I've already seen what I need to see." "Karen," Alex said, trying to keep his frustration in check, "these are official documents. If you don't believe me, we can go over them together, or even consult a third party." "I don't have time for this," Karen interrupted, her tone dismissive. "I suggest you find another route. This road crosses my property, and that's the end of it." Alex sighed, sensing the futility of the conversation. "You're making a mistake," he said firmly before turning to leave. The next day, Alex discovered just how far Karen was willing to take her claims. Returning home from a grocery run, he found a set of massive steel gates erected at the entrance to the road. A large padlock secured them, and a hand-painted sign declared, "Private property, no trespassing." Fuming, Alex called the local sheriff's office. When the deputies arrived, Karen appeared on the scene with a smug expression. "This gate is on my land," she declared confidently. "I'm within my rights to install it. If Alex doesn't like it, he can take it up with the courts." The deputies, caught in the middle of a civil dispute, could do little beyond filing a report. Alex's frustration mounted as he realized that Karen was willing to drag the issue into a legal quagmire. But Karen wasn't finished. Days later, Alex woke to the sound of heavy machinery. Stepping outside, he saw a crew of workers tearing apart the road just beyond the locked gates. Karen, supervising from the sidelines, directed the workers as they dug trenches and piled enormous boulders across the path. "What the hell are you doing?" Alex shouted, striding toward her. Karen turned with a triumphant grin. "Improving my property," she said. "Since you're so insistent on using my land, I'm making sure you can't damage it anymore." "You're cutting off my access to my own home," Alex exclaimed, his voice rising. "That's not my problem," Karen replied with a shrug. By the time the workers were finished, Alex's once reliable road was little more than a debris field. His truck was stranded on the far side, forcing him to leave it at a distant neighbor's property and trek several kilometers through dense forest whenever he needed to leave or return home. Karen's actions didn't stop there. She filed a lawsuit against Alex, claiming that his illegal use of her land had caused irreparable harm. In her filing, she demanded monetary compensation and an injunction to permanently ban him from the road. For Alex, it was the ultimate insult. Not only had she destroyed his road and cut off his access to the outside world, but now she was trying to paint herself as the victim. Determined not to let Karen bully him into submission, Alex began to prepare for a battle unlike any he had faced before. Alex had always been a man of patience, but even his seemingly unshakable resolve had its limits. It was clear that Karen had no intention of backing down, and her relentless campaign of destruction and intimidation left him no choice but to escalate the matter. Determined to protect his home and his rights, Alex hired a sharp-witted property attorney, Michelle Turner, whose reputation for dismantling baseless claims was well known. Michelle immediately set to work, assembling a mountain of evidence to counter Karen's claims. Alex unearthed every scrap of paperwork related to his land. Old deeds, detailed surveys, and even historical maps from the county archives. These documents painted an irrefutable picture. The road in question had always been a legal and integral part of his property, but Michelle knew that documents alone might not be enough to win in court. Karen was crafty and likely to twist the narrative, so Alex set out to collect additional proof. He reached out to longtime residents of the area, neighbors who had lived there for decades and could testify that the road had been in place long before Karen's arrival. Many were eager to help, sharing anecdotes and even old photographs that showed the road in use. At Michelle's suggestion, Alex also installed discreet security cameras along the ruined road. Within days, they captured critical footage. Karen directing her hired workers to tear apart sections of the path, laughing as they dumped boulders and debris to create an impassable barrier. In one particularly damning clip, she could be seen boasting to the workers about her plan to force Alex to give up and sell. The evidence was damning, and Alex felt a renewed sense of determination as the pieces of his case came together. But Karen was about to give him an unexpected gift, an opportunity to catch her in the act. One crisp morning, Alex awoke to the sound of engines rumbling outside. He grabbed his jacket and hurried to the scene. There she was, Karen, flanked by two laborers, erecting yet another barrier on the remnants of the road. Her smug grin vanished when Alex appeared, phone in hand, recording every moment. "What are you doing now, Karen?" Alex demanded, his voice steady but tinged with anger. Karen turned to face him, her hands on her hips. "Making sure you understand that this is my property," she snapped. "You're trespassing." "This is my road," Alex replied firmly. "And I've had enough." Alex pulled out his phone and dialed the local sheriff's office. Within minutes, 2 deputies arrived, their flashing lights slicing through the forest. Karen greeted them with her usual bravado, launching into a tirade about her rights and Alex's supposed violations. But this time, Alex was ready. He handed the deputies a folder containing his meticulously prepared evidence, property deeds, surveys, and recent footage from his cameras. The deputies reviewed the documents, their expressions growing more serious with each passing moment. When they turned to Karen, she was visibly flustered. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "That road crosses my land. He has no right." One of the deputies interrupted her. "Ma'am, the evidence clearly shows that this road is part of Mr. Alex's property, and we also have video footage of you directing workers to destroy it." Karen's composure cracked. Her voice rose to a shrill pitch as she pointed at Alex. "He's lying. He's manipulating the evidence." The deputies exchanged a look before addressing Alex. "Sir, would you like to press charges for property destruction and trespassing?" Alex hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, I would." As the deputies began documenting the scene, Karen's frustration boiled over. She screamed insults at Alex, accusing him of ruining her life and threatening that he'd regret this for the rest of his days. Her outburst, captured on Alex's phone and witnessed by the officers, sealed her fate. That day marked a turning point. With her public meltdown and the overwhelming evidence against her, Karen had inadvertently handed Alex the key to securing justice. The legal battle wasn't over, but Alex walked away from the confrontation with something even more valuable than proof. He had the moral high ground, and Karen's own actions had ensured she could no longer deny the truth. The courtroom was packed with onlookers the day the trial began. News of the bizarre dispute between Alex and Karen had spread, and the public's curiosity about the outcome was palpable. Karen, seated beside her attorney, exuded a veneer of confidence, her chin held high and her gaze steady. Across the room, Alex sat with his lawyer, Michelle Turner, his demeanor calm but resolute. Karen's defense started predictably. Her lawyer painted a picture of her as a victim, a property owner simply trying to protect her rights against a neighbor who had allegedly trespassed and refused to cooperate. She leaned into the narrative, nodding solemnly, as her attorney claimed Alex had willfully ignored property boundaries and caused irreparable damage to her land by his continued use of the road. But the cracks in Karen's story began to show the moment Michelle took the floor. With her characteristic precision, she laid out a compelling case that dismantled Karen's claims piece by piece. Michelle began by presenting historical maps and deeds, tracing the history of Alex's property and its road. The documents were indisputable, clearly showing that the road had always been part of Alex's land. Michelle even called upon a local historian who explained how the road had been an essential part of the area's infrastructure long before Karen had moved in. Next, Michelle unveiled the video evidence. The courtroom fell silent as footage from Alex's security cameras played on a screen. The videos captured Karen directing her workers to destroy the road, her voice dripping with malice as she ordered them to block Alex's access. In one clip, Karen's own words, "This will teach him who's in charge," echoed in the courtroom, destroying any remaining pretense of her innocence. But Michelle wasn't finished. She called witnesses into the stand, neighbors who described Karen's aggressive tactics and manipulative behavior. One elderly resident recounted how Karen had tried to intimidate him into siding with her, claiming that Alex was a danger to the community. Another testified to seeing Karen laughing as she watched her workers pile boulders on the road. Each testimony painted a damning picture of a woman determined to wield control at any cost. Karen's attorney attempted to salvage the case, suggesting the evidence was circumstantial and arguing that Karen's actions were justified as necessary property maintenance. But the judge, visibly unimpressed, repeatedly questioned the validity of her claims. By the time Michelle rested her case, Karen's confidence had crumbled. Her once defiant posture had given way to fidgeting, her composure cracking under the weight of the overwhelming evidence against her. When the verdict was delivered, it was swift and decisive. The court ruled in Alex's favor, declaring that the road was unequivocally part of his property. The judge condemned Karen's actions as deliberate and malicious, noting the significant material and emotional harm she had caused. Karen was ordered to pay a nosy substantial fine to cover the full cost of restoring the road and compensating Alex for his legal fees and personal distress. Additionally, the court sentenced her to a community service, requiring her to spend the next 6 months assisting with local infrastructure projects, a fitting punishment for someone who had so gleefully destroyed a vital connection. As the gavel struck, Karen's face was a portrait of defeat. She avoided Alex's gaze as she hurried out of the courtroom, trailed by her lawyer. For Alex, the victory was more than just a legal triumph. It was a vindication of his resilience and determination. As he left the courthouse, neighbors and supporters approached to shake his hand and congratulate him. Alex, ever humble, simply smiled and said, "I just wanted what was right." The ordeal had been grueling, but Alex knew one thing for certain: justice had prevailed, and his hard-earned peace was finally restored. For Alex, the courtroom victory marked the end of months of stress and upheaval. With the court-ordered funds in hand, he wasted no time hiring a team to restore the damaged road. The sound of heavy machinery clearing debris and rebuilding the pathway became a daily reminder that justice had prevailed. Within weeks, the road was not just restored but improved, making it sturdier and more reliable than before. The support Alex received from his neighbors was a pleasant surprise. Many who had previously stayed silent, either out of fear of Karen's wrath or desire to avoid conflict, now rallied behind him. They visited his home with words of encouragement and even offered to help clear debris or run errands while the road was under construction. One elderly neighbor remarked, "You stood up for what's right, Alex. We're lucky to have someone like you in the community." Karen, however, faced a far bleaker aftermath. Her once commanding presence in the neighborhood was reduced to whispers and avoided glances. With her reputation in ruins and the financial burden of hefty fines and legal fees weighing heavily on her, she had no choice but to sell her property. The house, which she had once flaunted as a symbol of her superiority, became a painful reminder of her downfall. When Karen moved out, the community breathed a collective sigh of relief. Her departure marked the end of her reign of intimidation, and her absence paved the way for a renewed sense of camaraderie among the neighbors. The ripple effects of the trial extended beyond Alex and Karen. The case became a wake-up call for the community, sparking important conversations about accountability and boundaries. Residents began to take a more active role in ensuring fairness and discouraging any potential abuses of power. A neighborhood association was formed, not to enforce strict rules, but to foster communication and mutual support. In the months that followed, the once fractured community grew closer. Block parties, shared gardening projects, and neighborhood cleanups became regular events, creating bonds that transcended property lines. For Alex, the ordeal reaffirmed the importance of standing one's ground. Sitting on his porch one sunny afternoon, watching cars travel smoothly along his newly rebuilt road, he felt a profound sense of peace. The battle had been hard fought, but it had also brought unexpected rewards: a safer road, a stronger community, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice, in the end, had prevailed. Sitting on his porch as the golden hues of sunset filtered through the trees, Alex felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The air, once thick with tension and uncertainty, now carried a lightness that mirrored his renewed peace of mind. The ordeal he had endured wasn't something he would have chosen, but it had taught him invaluable lessons about resilience and the power of standing up for oneself. As he sipped his tea, Alex found himself reflecting on the journey. He thought about the fear and frustration that had gripped him in the early days of the conflict. There had been moments when giving in or simply walking away seemed tempting, an easier path. But he knew then, as he knew now, that surrendering to intimidation would have meant sacrificing not just his road, but his principles. Fear, he mused, is a weapon bullies use to control others. But truth and persistence are far stronger. Alex realized that his fight wasn't just about a road. It was about protecting the life he had built and setting a precedent that others in the community could draw strength from. The trial had been a grueling experience, but it also reaffirmed Alex's belief in the justice system. The law, when supported by truth and evidence, could prevail even against the most aggressive opposition. He thought about his neighbors, many of whom had once seemed distant and uninterested. The solidarity they showed during and after the trial revealed a depth of community spirit he hadn't fully appreciated before. Karen's actions, while destructive, had inadvertently brought the neighborhood closer together, teaching them the importance of standing against injustice as a united front. For Alex, the moral of the story was clear. Defending one's rights is not just an act of self-preservation. It's a stand for fairness, dignity, and justice. The battle he fought wasn't just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been silenced or bullied into submission. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, Alex smiled. He knew the road ahead, both literal and metaphorical, would be smoother from now on. The experience had left its mark, but it also left him stronger, more resolute, and deeply grateful for the peace he had worked so hard to protect. Justice, he thought, isn't just about the outcome. It's about the courage to fight for what's right, no matter how daunting the challenge. With that, Alex stood, ready to embrace the next chapter of his life, knowing he had done what was necessary and what was right.